I am Alara. This is the chronicle of my fractured spirit. It was broken not by a singular catastrophe, but by the slow, corrosive decay of familial secrets. The chilling apathy of those who should have cherished me also contributed. It commenced when I was 16. That night, though decades passed, still echoes through my very core. Blackwood Manor, our home, stood as a monument to old money and colder hearts. Its Gothic spires and sprawling gardens whispered tales of generations. Yet, to me, it was merely a gilded cage. My mother, Eleanor, a woman sculpted from ice and ambition, ruled it with an iron fist concealed by velvet. My father, Richard, a man whose backbone seemed surgically removed, merely orbited her. He was a silent, complicit shadow. Then there was Seraphina, my older sister. She was the sun around whom their universe revolved. Beautiful, graceful, and effortlessly charming, she embodied everything I was not. Or, more precisely, everything they demanded me to be. My disownment unfolded without a dramatic shouting match. It was a quiet, clinical execution. I recall the drawing room, its air heavy with the scent of aged leather and wilting lilies. Eleanor sat, regal and unyielding. Her eyes were like chips of glacial ice. "Alara," she began, her voice utterly devoid of warmth. "Your persistent defiance, your refusal to embrace the values defining our lineage, has become an intolerable burden. You are no longer welcome here. My transgression was not merely a refusal to enter a strategic marriage, nor simply a preference for literature over social gatherings. It was a deeper affront. I had dared to scrutinize the sanctity of the Beaumont family's ancestral lands. Specifically, I questioned a forgotten clause in an ancient deed. It hinted at a distant, disinherited branch of the family possessing a claim. I had inadvertently unearthed a truth. Eleanor perceived it as a direct menace to their meticulously constructed dominion. Richard remained by the fireplace, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames. His silence was a profound testament to his cowardice. Seraphina, I remember, was conspicuously absent. Perhaps she was already mastering the art of willful ignorance. Or perhaps, even then, she was being shielded from the inherent ugliness of our mother. That night, I departed Blackwood Manor. I carried nothing but the clothes on my back, and a heart fractured into countless irreparable fragments. The ensuing years blurred into a tapestry of struggle and fierce independence. Initial shock yielded to a burning imperative for survival. I secured employment in a vibrant city, far removed from Blackwood's suffocating grandeur. My roles ranged from waitress to library assistant. The library's hushed ambiance, enveloped by narratives and wisdom, became my refuge. There, I encountered Professor Alistair Finch. He was a retired historian, possessing a fondness for arcane genealogies and a gentle, crinkled smile. He perceived in me more than a weary teenager. He saw a keen intellect, eager for comprehension. He became my mentor, imparting not only historical knowledge, but also the art of navigating the world with sagacity and fortitude. He instilled in me the invaluable lesson that knowledge is power. Life presented its hardships, yet it was unequivocally mine. I learned to cherish the inherent dignity of self-sufficiency, the quiet contentment derived from a self-funded meal, a self-secured dwelling. Nevertheless, the wound of rejection never truly mended. Periodically, a glossy magazine cover would showcase Seraphina, resplendent at a charity gala, her impeccably tailored husband, Julian Vance, by her side. Or a society column would extol Eleanor's latest philanthropic endeavor, her name synonymous with grace and munificence. Their seemingly flawless lives served as a constant, derisive counterpoint to my solitary existence. I observed Seraphina's engagement, her extravagant wedding, her ascent into society's upper echelons, all from a distance. I was a specter haunting the periphery of a life I was never destined to inhabit. Bitterness became a familiar companion, a persistent ache that ignited whenever their names emerged. 5 years after my exile, the news arrived. It wasn't a personal letter, of course. Instead, a formal, embossed invitation heralded a family celebration. Seraphina was pregnant. The heir. The continuation of their pristine lineage. The accompanying Gazette article gushed about the blessed event and the joyous anticipation within the esteemed Beaumont family. This news felt like a fresh stab, a brutal reminder of my perceived worthlessness. My sister, the celebrated mother-to-be, flourished. I, the disowned, remained an inconvenient truth, a blemish on their immaculate tapestry. The article even featured a quote from Eleanor, her voice dripping with saccharine pride. A new generation to uphold the Beaumont name, a testament to our enduring legacy. It was a declaration, a reaffirmation of everything I had been cast out for. The injustice of it all burned with renewed intensity. Just as bitterness threatened to consume me, a small, unassuming envelope arrived at my modest apartment. It bore no return address. My name was scrawled in an elegant, slightly shaky hand, a script I vaguely recognized from childhood. Inside, nestled within the folds of a faded silk handkerchief, lay a single, antique key. It was intricately wrought, bearing a distinctive crest I knew belonged to Blackwood Manor. Alongside it, a note, penned in the same familiar hand, read, "Blackwood holds more than memories, child. Some secrets are best left buried. Others demand to be unearthed. The roots of our family tree run deeper and darker than you know. Be careful, Alara. Not all celebrations are born of joy. Look for the forgotten places, the ones only you would remember." This was from Aunt Beatrice, my mother's eccentric cousin. She had always seemed to perceive more than she revealed, a quiet observer who often offered me a conspiratorial wink when Eleanor's pronouncements grew too grand. Her words, cryptic and unsettling, ignited a spark beyond mere resentment, curiosity. A dangerous, irresistible curiosity began to chip away at the hardened shell I had built around my heart. The key, I realized, was for the old garden shed. It was a place I used to hide in as a child, a forgotten corner of the estate Eleanor rarely visited. It was a long shot. Yet, Beatrice's warning had burrowed deep, planting a seed of doubt about the narrative I had accepted for so long. Was my disownment truly about simple defiance? Was Seraphina's celebrated pregnancy merely joyous anticipation? The thought was chilling, but it was enough to compel me to act. Days later, the decision to return to Blackwood Manor was made. It was not made lightly. It was a pilgrimage fueled by a potent cocktail of lingering pain, burning curiosity, and a nascent hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the truth might offer a different kind of solace than the bitter satisfaction of self-pity. Professor Finch, with his sagely wisdom, had often reminded me that understanding, even painful understanding, was a prerequisite for true healing. Armed with Beatrice's cryptic note and the antique key, I booked a train ticket. The journey, a symbolic crossing of a chasm I had believed unbridgeable. Blackwood Manor loomed in the distance. It was a silhouette against the bruised twilight sky, as imposing and unwelcoming as ever. The wrought iron gates, once symbols of my imprisonment, now felt like a challenge. I avoided the main entrance. Instead, I circled the perimeter, my heart thrumming a nervous rhythm against my ribs. The overgrown hedges, once meticulously manicured, now offered a welcome screen of anonymity. I located the familiar break in the wall. A loose stone had always provided easy access there, a secret passage known only to me and, perhaps, Seraphina. In our childhood games, it remained a silent invitation. Slipping through, I was immediately enveloped by the scent of damp earth and forgotten roses. The gardens, once a vibrant tapestry of color, were now a wild, untamed wilderness. It mirrored the chaos within me. Every rustle of leaves, every creak of a branch sent a jolt of adrenaline through my veins. I felt like a phantom in my own past, a ghost haunting the grounds of my former life. The shed, my childhood sanctuary, stood at the far end of the property, partially obscured by a weeping willow. Its wooden door, weathered and warped, seemed to sigh as the antique key turned in its lock with a rusty, protesting click. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint, sweet smell of decay. Forgotten gardening tools lay scattered, a testament to a life that had moved on without me. Tucked beneath a pile of old, brittle gardening gloves, just as Beatrice's note had hinted, was a small leather-bound journal. It belonged to Seraphina. Its cover was embossed with her initials, S.B., in faded gold. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. The weight of it felt suddenly immense. This was more than just a diary. It felt like a direct line to the sister I had lost, or perhaps never truly known. I retreated to a small, secluded inn on the outskirts of town. It was far enough from Blackwood to feel safe, yet close enough to continue my clandestine investigation. Under the dim glow of a bedside lamp, I began to read. Serafina's early journal entries mirrored my memories of her. They were filled with girlish dreams, social anxieties, and the innocent hopes of a young woman navigating our family's complex expectations. She chronicled her engagement to Julian Vance, her excitement, and her fears about upholding the Beaumont name. However, as I delved deeper, the tone shifted. It was subtle at first, then grew with increasing urgency. The elegant cursive script began to fray, the words becoming more frantic, more desperate. Mother insists. I can't. It's not right. One entry from 2 years prior read, "The pressure is unbearable. Julian Vance is wonderful, but there's a shadow hanging over everything. Mother speaks of legacy and duty with such intensity. I feel like a pawn in a game I don't understand." The name Julian recurred, but it wasn't Julian Vance. It was another Julian. The name sent a shiver down my spine, stirring a faint, unsettling childhood memory. Julian Thorne. He was a distant cousin, the family's black sheep. Rumors suggested his involvement in a scandal years ago, followed by banishment. His name had been scrubbed from family conversations, his very existence a taboo. Why was Serafina writing about him? The entries grew more explicit, detailing hushed conversations, veiled threats, and a chilling revelation. A grotesque picture began to form in my mind. Serafina's pregnancy, the celebrated event, was not the outcome of a joyous union with her husband. It was a desperate, calculated act. The family's fortune, I learned through her frantic scribblings, was tethered to a convoluted inheritance clause. This clause mandated a male heir born within the direct line. Without one, the entire estate would revert to a distant, estranged branch, Julian Thorne's branch. And Serafina's husband, the charming, affluent Julian Vance, was infertile. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. Eleanor, in her ruthless pursuit of maintaining the family's wealth and status, had orchestrated a horrifying deception. Serafina, the golden child, was being compelled to conceive with Julian Thorne, the banished cousin, to secure the family's wealth. Her public celebration was a meticulously crafted lie, a desperate charade to uphold their facade of perfection. My disownment, I now understood, transcended mere defiance. It wasn't about questioning a dusty old deed. Instead, it stemmed from my inadvertent discovery of Julian Thorne's existence years ago. I had asked too many questions about his sudden disappearance. I was a loose end, a potential threat to their meticulously constructed deception. Eleanor hadn't simply disowned me. She had exiled me to safeguard a secret. That secret now threatened to consume her favored daughter. I reread the last entry, dated just weeks before the pregnancy announcement. I can't escape. Mother says it's for the family, for the legacy. But what about me? What about the child? I am a vessel, nothing more. And Julian Thorne, he looks at me with such pity, such sorrow. He knows. We both know. This child will be born into a lie, and I will be its willing prisoner. My soul is already broken. My sister, the celebrated, the perfect, was a victim. She was a pawn in Eleanor's ruthless game. I, the disowned, had been cast out not for imperfection, but for being too close to the truth. This realization settled in my gut like a cold, hard stone. It wasn't merely my family's rejection that wounded me. It was the monstrous depths of their manipulation, the casual cruelty with which they sacrificed their own children for wealth and appearances. Serafina's celebrated pregnancy, once a symbol of my pain, now stood as a grotesque monument to her silent suffering. What followed truly broke my soul. It wasn't the disownment itself, but the chilling understanding of why. The knowledge that my mother, the woman who gave me life, was capable of such calculated, heartless manipulation was devastating. The realization that my father's silence was not just weakness, but complicity in a scheme that devoured his own daughters, was equally crushing. And Serafina, my beautiful, broken sister, was trapped in a gilded cage far more terrifying than the one I had escaped. I held the journal, its pages heavy with her despair. I knew then that the perfect family facade was built on a foundation of rot and lies. The choice was now mine. Expose the truth and shatter their world, or carry the burden of their monstrous secret, forever haunted by the echoes of a celebration that was, in reality, a funeral for a sacrificed life. The silence of the night pressed in, heavy with the weight of my discovery, and the chilling certainty that some wounds never truly heal. They merely fester, waiting for the opportune moment to break you anew. The journal was a raw, unfiltered scream from Serafina's soul. Yet, it also raised more questions than it answered. Who was Julian Thorne now? Where was he? And what exactly was the nature of this inheritance clause that held my family in such a terrifying grip? I knew I couldn't confront Eleanor directly. Not yet. I needed more information, more allies. My thoughts turned to Aunt Beatrice. I found Beatrice living in a small, unassuming cottage nestled deep in the countryside, far from the prying eyes of the Beaumonts. Her home was a chaotic symphony of antique books, exotic plants, and the comforting scent of herbal tea. She greeted me with a knowing smile, as if she had been expecting me. "So, you found the key, child," she said, her eyes twinkling with a mixture of sadness and triumph. "And the journal, I presume?" Over cups of strong, fragrant tea, Beatrice began to unravel the tangled web of the Beaumont legacy. "The Beaumonts," she explained, her voice soft but firm, "have always been obsessed with bloodlines and property. Generations ago, a distant cousin, Alaric Thorne, a brilliant but rebellious man, was disinherited. He had married outside the approved circles. He vowed that his lineage would one day reclaim what was rightfully theirs. Consequently, a convoluted clause was added to the family trust. It stipulated that if the direct Beaumont line failed to produce a male heir within a certain time frame, the entire estate would revert to the Thorne branch. Eleanor, in her infinite paranoia, discovered this clause years ago. When Julian Vance, Serafina's husband, was found to be infertile, she saw her worst fears realized. "But why Julian Thorne?" I asked, the name still tasting bitter on my tongue. "He was banished, wasn't he?" Beatrice sighed. "Julian Thorne is Alaric's direct descendant. He was a brilliant young artist, possessing a fierce independent streak, much like you, Alara. He also had the misfortune of being distantly related to the Beaumonts. This made him a potential threat to Eleanor's control. When he discovered the inheritance clause through his own research, he attempted to warn Eleanor, to negotiate, but she perceived it as blackmail. She framed him for a minor embezzlement. It was enough to ruin his reputation and force him into exile, ensuring he wouldn't challenge her. Yet, she kept him close enough, in her twisted mind, as a contingency, a breeding stallion, if you will, for her precious legacy." The words hung in the air, chilling me to the bone. She forced Serafina. "With him?" I whispered, the horror of it almost unbearable. Beatrice nodded, her gaze distant. "Eleanor is a master manipulator," she stated. She convinced Serafina it was her duty. She claimed Julian Vance's business would collapse, that the entire family would face ruin if Serafina didn't comply. Eleanor isolated Serafina, preying on her fears and loyalty. Julian Thorne, broken and desperate, also saw no other escape. He was as much a victim as Serafina, both ensnared by Eleanor's machinations. "And my disownment?" I asked, the old wound throbbing anew. "You were too curious, Alara," Beatrice said, her eyes meeting mine. "You inquired about Julian Thorne, about the old deeds. You were a loose thread, a potential unraveler of her carefully woven tapestry of lies. She couldn't risk you digging deeper. Not with such high stakes. Your exile was a preemptive strike designed to remove any obstacle to her grand design. The truth, laid bare by Beatrice, was far more monstrous than I had ever imagined. My mother wasn't merely cold. She was a calculating sociopath. She was willing to sacrifice her own children for the sake of an inheritance, a name, a facade. Serafina's pregnancy celebration was not just a lie. It was a grotesque ritual, a public display of ownership over my sister's body and future. My soul, already fractured, felt pulverized into dust. The weight of this knowledge was crushing, a burden almost too heavy to bear, but it also ignited a new kind of fire within me. It was not resentment, but a fierce, protective rage. I had been cast out for being a threat. Now, I would become one. For Serafina, for Julian Thorne, for the truth. My next step was clear. I had to locate Julian Thorne. Beatrice, utilizing her network of discreet contacts, provided me with a general location. It was a remote, dilapidated cabin nestled deep in the woods, a place where he could conceal himself from the world and his past. The journey proved arduous, a stark contrast to Blackwood's opulent world. The cabin itself was even more desolate than I had imagined, a stark testament to a life stripped bare. Julian Thorne was not the man I remembered from childhood whispers. He was gaunt, his eyes haunted, yet a flicker of defiance remained, a spark unextinguished. He was wary, suspicious, and deeply resentful. "What do you want, Beaumont?" he snarled, his voice rough with disuse. "Have you come to gloat? To witness the fallen prince?" "I came to understand," I replied, holding up Serafina's journal. "And to help." I explained everything. My disownment, Beatrice's revelations, the journal itself. I watched as his hardened facade slowly crumbled, replaced by a raw, agonizing pain. He read Serafina's words, his hands trembling, tears tracing paths through the grime on his cheeks. She wrote this?" he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "I tried to tell her. I tried to warn her. But Eleanor, she possesses a way of twisting everything, of making you believe there's no other choice." Julian recounted his own story. He detailed how he had discovered the inheritance clause, how he had attempted to approach Eleanor with a compromise, only to be framed and banished. He spoke of his forced encounters with Serafina, the shame, the guilt, the desperate hope that somehow they could find a way out. "We were both trapped, Alara," he said, his voice laced with despair. "Two birds in a gilded cage, compelled to sing Eleanor's tune. Our shared pain, our mutual enemy, forged a reluctant alliance." Julian, despite his broken spirit, possessed a keen intellect. He deeply understood the Beaumont family's intricate legal and financial structures. He knew the loopholes, the hidden accounts, and the precise wording of the inheritance clause Eleanor was so desperate to protect. He also harbored a burning desire for justice, not just for himself, but for Serafina and the innocent child caught in their mother's web. "We can't simply expose her," Julian warned, his eyes hardening. "Eleanor wields too much power, possesses too many connections. She'll crush us. We require irrefutable proof. Something that will not only expose her, but also safeguard Serafina and the child." Our plan began to materialize. It was audacious, dangerous, and demanded we delve deeper into the dark heart of the Beaumont Empire. We needed to unearth the original inheritance documents, concrete proof of Julian's banishment, and, most crucially, a method to secure Serafina's testimony without jeopardizing her or the unborn child. The stakes were higher than ever, yet, for the first time in years, I felt a purpose beyond mere survival. I was fighting not just for myself, but for the family I had lost, and for the truth that had been buried for far too long. Our next target was Richard, my father. Julian believed that Richard, despite his cowardice, might possess a crucial piece of the puzzle. He was Eleanor's shadow, privy to her secrets, even if he lacked the courage to act upon them. I approached him cautiously, arranging a discreet meeting away from Blackwood, in a quiet, anonymous cafe. He appeared older, more fragile than I remembered, his eyes filled with a perpetual sadness. "Alara," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "I knew you would return one day. I always hoped you would." I laid out the journal, Julian's story, Beatrice's revelations. I watched as his face crumpled. The last vestiges of his composure dissolved into silent, agonizing grief. "She's a monster, isn't she?" he finally choked out, tears streaming down his face. "I tried to stop her, Alara. I truly did. But she threatened to expose my own past. A financial indiscretion, years ago, would have ruined the family name. She holds it over me. Always. I'm a prisoner, just like Serafina. Richard confessed his complicity, his weakness, his profound regret. But he also revealed a crucial detail. Eleanor keeps everything, he said, his voice gaining desperate urgency. Every document, every secret is in a hidden safe in her study. There's a ledger, a Lara. It details every transaction, every manipulation, every step of her plan to secure the Thorne inheritance. It even contains the original, signed agreement between her and Julian Thorne, outlining the terms of Seraphina's arrangement. He drew a crude map on a napkin. It detailed the safe's location, its combination, and a hidden key to Eleanor's study. It's a long shot, he warned, but it's the only way. You must be careful, Alara. She's ruthless. She won't hesitate to destroy anyone who stands in her way. His confession, while heartbreaking, provided us with the final piece of the puzzle, the ledger, the irrefutable proof we needed to expose Eleanor and free Seraphina. But it also deepened the chasm in my soul. My father, a man I had once admired, was not just weak, but a willing participant in my mother's monstrous schemes. The realization was a bitter pill to swallow, but it solidified my resolve. There was no turning back now. The truth, however painful, had to be brought to light. For Seraphina, for Julian, and for the innocent child who deserved a life free from the Beaumont family's dark legacy. The plan was set. The Beaumont family was hosting their annual summer gala. It was a lavish affair, designed to showcase their wealth and impeccable social standing. This was the perfect stage for Eleanor's downfall. Julian, utilizing his artistic skills, had created a series of anonymous damning documents. These included copies of the ledger entries, the inheritance clause, and excerpts from Seraphina's journal, all carefully redacted to protect her identity. These documents would be strategically placed among the guests, slipped into programs, and left on tables, ensuring maximum exposure. My role was more direct and far more perilous. I would infiltrate Eleanor's study, retrieve the original ledger, and then, at the opportune moment, confront her. Richard, racked with guilt, had agreed to create a diversion. He would draw Eleanor away from her study for a crucial window of time. It was a desperate gamble, but we had no other choice. The night of the gala was a blur of glittering gowns, hushed conversations, and the clinking of champagne glasses. I moved through Blackwood Manor's familiar halls like a ghost. Each step was a painful reminder of the life I had lost. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfumes and the unspoken anxieties of the elite. I found Eleanor's study, the hidden key working silently in the lock. Inside, the room was a shrine to her power, filled with antique furniture, leather-bound books, and a cold, sterile atmosphere. I located the safe, my hands trembling as I entered the combination Richard had given me. The heavy door swung open, revealing stacks of documents, old photographs, and finally, the ledger. Its cover was plain, unassuming, but its contents held the power to shatter the Beaumont Empire. As I grabbed the ledger, a voice, sharp and cold as ice, cut through the silence. Looking for something, Alara? Eleanor stood in the doorway. Her eyes blazed with terrifying fury. Richard's diversion had failed. Or perhaps he had betrayed me. My heart plummeted. I was trapped. You know, don't you? I said, holding up the ledger. My voice was surprisingly steady. Everything about Seraphina, about Julian Thorne, about the inheritance. Eleanor's face contorted into a mask of pure rage. You meddling little fool. You think you can destroy everything I've built? She lunged for me. Her manicured fingers were like claws. I dodged her, but she was surprisingly strong, fueled by a desperate, primal need to protect her secrets. We struggled. The ledger fell to the floor, its pages scattering. The noise attracted attention. Footsteps echoed in the hall. The door burst open, revealing a horrified Seraphina. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with terror. Behind her stood Julian Thorne, his face grim, and a few bewildered guests. "Mother, stop!" Seraphina cried, her voice a raw, desperate plea. "It's over!" Eleanor froze, her gaze fixed on Seraphina, then on Julian Thorne, then on the scattered pages of the ledger. The mask of control finally slipped, revealing a flicker of something akin to fear in her eyes. Whispers began, spreading like wildfire through the stunned guests. The truth, ugly and undeniable, was out. The perfect facade of the Beaumont family shattered into a million pieces. What followed was a maelstrom. The media descended, ravenous for the scandal. The Beaumont name, once synonymous with prestige, became a byword for deception and cruelty. Eleanor, stripped of her power and reputation, retreated into a bitter, isolated existence. Richard, finally freed from her tyranny, found a semblance of peace, though he remained haunted by his past. Julian Vance, Seraphina's husband, filed for divorce. He was disgusted by the deception, but not without offering Seraphina his support. Seraphina, fragile but resolute, chose to leave Blackwood Manor. She took Julian Thorne with her. They sought a new life, far from the toxic legacy of the Beaumonts, hoping to raise their child in a world free from deceit. Our relationship, once fractured by resentment, began a slow, tentative healing. We were sisters, bound not by shared privilege, but by shared trauma and the arduous path to recovery. My soul, once shattered, was not entirely mended. The scars remained, deep and indelible, woven into the very tapestry of my being. The chilling understanding of why I was disowned, the monstrous depths of my mother's manipulation, had transformed me, yes, but it had also carved an emptiness, a profound sense of loss for the family I had once cherished. The echoes of that celebrated pregnancy, once a symbol of my profound pain, now resonated as a stark, haunting reminder of the price of silence and the enduring, often brutal, power of truth. I had learned that while truth could indeed set you free, its liberation rarely came without a profound cost. The weight of what I knew, the burden of those dark secrets, became a constant companion, a shadow that sometimes lengthened in the quiet hours of the night, a silent testament to the battles fought and the peace yet to be fully won. I often thought of the child, little Alaric. He was the innocent at the heart of it all, a fragile beacon of hope born from the crucible of deceit. He represented both the Beaumonts' depravity and Seraphina and Julian's enduring love. His future, unburdened by the lies that had suffocated generations, was a promise whispered on the wind, a testament to the possibility of a new dawn. Blackwood Manor, a Gothic monument to a fallen empire, stood silent, its secrets finally laid bare, its power broken. And I, Alara, the disowned, the truth-teller, walked forward, not into a world free of shadows, but into one where I finally understood their source. Armed with the knowledge that even in the deepest darkness, the smallest flicker of truth could ignite a revolution of the soul. New Beaumont wing of a hospital, where the truth is dramatically revealed. The confrontation between Elora and Eleanor, Seraphina's reaction, and the public's response, the role of the anonymous documents distributed by Julian. 3. The fallout, the immediate consequences for Eleanor: public disgrace, legal repercussions, loss of power, Richard, his own reckoning, potential freedom or continued guilt, and Seraphina, her liberation, but also the trauma of her experience, the media frenzy and the collapse of the Beaumont Empire. 4. The resolution divided by new beginning, Alara, Seraphina, and Julian Thorne begin to heal. Seraphina and Julian build a new life together, perhaps with the child, away from the Beaumont influence. Alara finds her own path, perhaps continuing her work with Professor Finch, using her intellect to fight for justice. Her relationship with Seraphina begins a slow, tentative healing process. 5. Lingering scars and future. The story ends with a sense of hope, but also acknowledges the deep, lasting scars. Alara's soul is not entirely healed, but she has found purpose. The future is uncertain, but she faces it with strength and the knowledge that she fought for the truth. The legacy of Blackwood Manor remains, but its power is broken. The child's future is left with a glimmer of hope, free from the dark shadow of its origins. The Beaumont Annual Summer Gala was a spectacle of carefully curated opulence, a glittering charade designed to reinforce their unassailable position in society. This year, however, it would serve a different purpose, the stage for Eleanor's meticulously constructed world to crumble. Julian and I had spent weeks meticulously planning every detail. He, with his artistic eye and deep understanding of the manor's layout, had created a series of anonymous, damning documents. These weren't just copies of the ledger entries or the inheritance clause. They were expertly crafted summaries, designed to be easily digestible yet utterly devastating. Excerpts from Serafina's journal, carefully redacted to protect her identity, were woven into a narrative that painted Eleanor as the ruthless puppeteer she was. These would be strategically placed among the guests, slipped into programs, left on tables, ensuring maximum exposure without direct confrontation. My role was far more direct and infinitely more dangerous. I was to infiltrate Eleanor's study, retrieve the original ledger, the undeniable proof that would solidify our claims. Richard, racked with guilt and a newfound, fragile courage, had agreed to create a diversion. He would draw Eleanor away from her study for a crucial window of time, a desperate gamble that hinged on his ability to overcome his lifelong subservience momentarily. It was a plan fraught with peril, but we had no other choice. The truth, however painful, had to be brought to light. That night, Blackwood Manor pulsed with a false gaiety. The grand ballroom, usually a place of stifling formality, was alive with the murmur of conversation, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the soft strains of a string quartet. I moved through the throng like a ghost, every step a painful reminder of the life I had lost, the childhood innocence shattered within these very walls. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfumes, the cloying sweetness of lilies, and the unspoken anxieties of the elite. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the elegant facade. I found Eleanor's study, a room I hadn't entered since my disownment, its heavy oak door a barrier to the secrets within. The hidden key, a replica Richard had made years ago, worked silently in the lock, a testament to his long-held, secret rebellion. Inside, the room was a shrine to Eleanor's power, a testament to her cold, calculating intellect. Antique furniture, leather-bound books on law and finance, and a meticulously organized desk spoke of a life dedicated to control. I located the safe, hidden behind a false panel in the bookshelf, my hands trembling as I entered the combination Richard had given me. The heavy door swung open with a soft click, revealing stacks of documents, old photographs, and finally, the ledger. Its cover was plain, unassuming, but its contents held the power to shatter the Beaumont Empire. I snatched it, my fingers closing around the worn leather, a surge of triumph mixed with terror coursing through me. As I turned to leave, a voice, sharp and cold as a winter wind, cut through the silence. "Looking for something, Alara?" Eleanor stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of the hall lights. Her eyes, usually glacial, blazed with a terrifying fury, a primal rage that made my blood run cold. Richard's diversion had failed. Or perhaps he had betrayed me. My heart plummeted, a leaden weight in my chest. I was trapped. "You know, don't you?" I said, holding up the ledger, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Everything. About Serafina. About Julian Thorne. About the inheritance. It's all here, Mother. Every sordid detail of your monstrous scheme." Eleanor's face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. "You meddling little fool. You think you can destroy everything I've built? Everything I've sacrificed for this family?" She lunged for me, her manicured fingers, usually so precise and elegant, now like claws, desperate to snatch the ledger. I dodged her, but she was surprisingly strong, fueled by a desperate, primal need to protect her secrets. We struggled. A silent, desperate dance of power and defiance. The ledger slipped from my grasp, falling to the polished hardwood floor, its pages scattering like fallen leaves, each one a fragment of the truth. The commotion, the muffled thuds of our struggle, attracted attention. Footsteps echoed in the hall, growing louder, closer. The study door burst open, revealing a horrified Serafina, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror and a dawning comprehension. Behind her, Julian Thorne, his face grim, his gaze fixed on Eleanor with a mixture of pity and contempt. And then, a few bewildered guests, their champagne flutes still in hand, their polite smiles frozen in confusion. The string quartet in the ballroom faltered, the music dying into an uneasy silence. "Mother, stop!" Serafina cried, her voice a raw, desperate plea that tore through the tense air. "It's over!" Eleanor froze, her gaze darting from Serafina to Julian Thorne, then to the scattered pages of the ledger, each one a damning piece of evidence. The mask of control, so meticulously maintained for decades, finally slipped, revealing a flicker of something akin to fear in her eyes. The whispers began, soft at first, then growing in volume, spreading like wildfire through the stunned guests. The truth, ugly and undeniable, was out. The perfect facade of the Beaumont family, the carefully constructed illusion of prestige and propriety, shattered into a million irreparable pieces, reflecting the broken shards of my own soul. What followed was a maelstrom. The media, ever ravenous for scandal, descended upon Blackwood Manor like vultures. The Beaumont name, once synonymous with old money and unblemished prestige, became a byword for deception, manipulation, and grotesque cruelty. The headlines screamed. The society pages were ablaze with the sordid details of the inheritance clause, the forced pregnancy, and Eleanor's ruthless machinations. The anonymous documents Julian had distributed ensured that the story was not just a rumor, but a meticulously documented exposé. Eleanor, stripped of her power, her reputation, and her carefully cultivated social standing, retreated into a bitter, isolated existence. The legal repercussions were swift and severe. The inheritance clause, once her weapon, became her undoing. The family trust was frozen, then dismantled, its assets redistributed according to the true intent of the original will, which favored the Thorne lineage. She faced charges of coercion and fraud, her once impenetrable world collapsing around her. The Ice Queen of Blackwood Manor was finally melting, but not into tears of remorse, only into a puddle of impotent rage. Richard, my father, found a strange, unsettling freedom in the aftermath. The weight of Eleanor's tyranny, the constant fear of her retribution, had been lifted. He cooperated fully with the authorities, his testimony a damning indictment of his wife's actions. He was not without his own reckoning, however. The years of silent complicity, the cowardice that had allowed Eleanor's schemes to flourish, left him with a profound, unshakable guilt. He sought solace in solitude, tending to the neglected gardens of Blackwood, a silent penance for his past failures. He would often look at me with eyes full of sorrow, a silent plea for forgiveness I wasn't yet ready to grant. Julian Vance, Serafina's husband, filed for divorce almost immediately. The public humiliation, the betrayal, was too much to bear. Yet, in a surprising act of grace, he offered Serafina his full support, both financial and emotional, recognizing her as a victim in Eleanor's cruel game. He understood that she, too, had been trapped, and his compassion was a balm on her wounded spirit. Serafina, fragile but resolute, chose to leave Blackwood Manor, taking Julian Thorne with her. They sought a new life, far from the toxic legacy of the Beaumonts, far from the whispers and judgment. They moved to a small, quiet town where they could raise their child in peace, free from the dark shadow of its origins. Their relationship, born of coercion and shared trauma, began a slow, tentative healing. They were two broken souls, finding solace and strength in each other, united by a child who deserved a future built on truth, not lies. Our relationship, once fractured by resentment and misunderstanding, began a slow, tentative healing as well. We were sisters, bound not by shared privilege, but by shared trauma and the difficult, arduous path to recovery. We had both been victims of Eleanor's ambition, but we had also, in our own ways, fought back. My soul, once broken, was not entirely healed. The scars remained, deep and indelible, etched into the very fabric of my being. The chilling understanding of why had transformed me, yes, but it had also left an emptiness, a profound sense of loss for the family I had once believed in. I was no longer the disowned, but the truth-teller, the one who had dared to challenge the darkness, to pull back the velvet curtain on a world of lies. The echoes of that celebrated pregnancy, once a symbol of my pain, now served as a stark reminder of the price of silence and the enduring, often brutal, power of truth. The silence of the night no longer pressed in with despair, but with the quiet, determined hum of a new beginning. A life forged in the crucible of revelation, forever changed, but finally, truly free. The legacy of Blackwood Manor remained, a Gothic monument to a fallen empire, but its power was broken, its secrets laid bare, and the child, Seraphina and Julian's child, would grow up knowing the truth, a truth that would hopefully allow them to forge their own path, unburdened by the sins of their ancestors. Months turned into a year. The dust settled, but the tremors of the Beaumont scandal continued to reverberate through society. Blackwood Manor, once a symbol of power, now stood as a stark monument to its downfall. Eleanor, stripped of her titles and assets, was a recluse, her once commanding presence reduced to a bitter whisper in the annals of social history. Richard, in his quiet penance, found a strange peace in the solitude of the gardens, his hands, once idle, now calloused from tending the earth. He never spoke of Eleanor, nor of the past, but his eyes, whenever they met mine, held a depth of sorrow and a silent plea for understanding that I was slowly, tentatively, beginning to acknowledge. Seraphina and Julian Thorne, with their newborn son, Alaric, named after Julian's disinherited ancestor, a quiet act of defiance against Eleanor's legacy, had truly vanished. They had found a small coastal town, far from the prying eyes of the media and the suffocating expectations of their past. I received occasional letters, filled with cautious hope and the simple joys of new parenthood. Seraphina wrote of Alaric's first smile, Julian's newfound passion for painting the rugged coastline, and the quiet strength they found in each other. Their healing was a testament to resilience, a fragile bloom in the aftermath of a devastating storm. Our sisterly bond, once a tangled mess of resentment and unspoken pain, was slowly, painstakingly, being rewoven. It was a bond forged in shared trauma, a silent understanding that transcended words. As for me, Ilara, the disowned, the truth-teller, I found my own path. Professor Finch, my old mentor, had been instrumental in helping me navigate the legal complexities of the Beaumont Trust. He saw in me not just a student, but a kindred spirit, someone who understood the power of hidden histories. Together, we established a small, independent research foundation dedicated to uncovering historical injustices and family secrets, providing a voice to those silenced by power and wealth. My work was fulfilling, a constant reminder that knowledge, when wielded with integrity, could be a force for good. I traveled, I researched, I wrote, my articles and exposés shedding light on other hidden corners of society, always remembering the chilling lessons of Blackwood Manor. Yet the scars remained, deep and indelible, etched into the very fabric of my being. The chilling understanding of why I was disowned, the monstrous depths of my mother's manipulation, had transformed me. Yes, but it had also left an emptiness, a profound sense of loss for the family I had once believed in. The echoes of that celebrated pregnancy, once a symbol of my pain, now served as a stark reminder of the price of silence and the enduring, often brutal, power of truth. I learned that while truth could set you free, it rarely came without a cost. The weight of what I knew, the burden of those dark secrets, was a constant companion, a shadow that sometimes lengthened in the quiet hours of the night. I often thought of the child, little Alaric. He was the innocent at the heart of it all, a symbol of both the Beaumont's depravity and Seraphina and Julian's enduring love. I hoped he would grow up in a world where his lineage was not a curse, but a story of survival, a testament to the courage of his parents. I hoped he would never know the cold, calculating ambition that had nearly consumed his family. His future, more than anything, represented the fragile hope that emerged from the wreckage of Blackwood Manor. The silence of the night no longer pressed in with despair, but with the quiet, determined hum of a new beginning, a life forged in the crucible of revelation, forever changed, but finally, truly free. The Gothic spires of Blackwood Manor still stood, a monument to a fallen empire, but its power was broken, its secrets laid bare. And I, Ilara, walked forward, not unburdened, but resolute, carrying the weight of the past, but looking towards a future where truth, however painful, would always prevail. The journey had broken my soul, but in its shattering, it had also forged something new, something stronger, something that understood the true meaning of freedom. Years passed. My foundation flourished, becoming a beacon for those seeking justice against powerful, entrenched interests. My name, Ilara Beaumont, once a mark of shame, was now synonymous with integrity and relentless truth-seeking. I had found my purpose, a life built on the very principles my family had sought to extinguish. Serafina and Julian thrived, their little family a testament to love's resilience. Alaric grew into a bright, curious boy, unaware of the dark genesis of his birth, shielded by his parents' unwavering devotion. One crisp autumn afternoon, a package arrived at my office. It was old, wrapped in plain brown paper, and bore no return address. Inside, nestled amongst layers of tissue, was a small, intricately carved wooden bird, a robin, and beneath it, a single, faded photograph. It was a picture of a young Eleanor, perhaps in her late teens, standing beside a stern-looking older woman, presumably her mother. But it was the background that caught my eye, a sprawling, dilapidated estate. Not Blackwood, but one that exuded a similar, decaying grandeur. And in the corner of the photo, almost obscured, was a small, familiar crest, the same crest that adorned the antique key Aunt Beatrice had sent me. Attached to the photograph was a short typewritten note, unsigned. "The roots run deeper than you know, Ilara. Every tyrant was once a victim. The cycle continues until someone breaks it. You have begun." The wooden robin. I remembered it. It was a gift from my grandmother, Eleanor's mother, to me when I was a very small child. A gift Eleanor had confiscated, deeming it too common for a Beaumont. How had it found its way back to me? And the photograph. It hinted at a past for Eleanor that I had never considered. A past where she, too, might have been a victim, molded by the same ruthless pursuit of legacy that she had inflicted upon her own daughters. My mind raced. Aunt Beatrice. She had always been the keeper of secrets, the one who saw beyond the facade. Could she have sent this? Was this her final cryptic message? A last piece of the puzzle? The note spoke of a cycle, of breaking it. Had Eleanor's ambition been born not just of greed, but of a desperate need to escape a similar fate, to reclaim a lost family glory? Was Blackwood Manor, in its own way, a monument to her own broken soul? A desperate attempt to rewrite a history of perceived failure? The revelation was not a sudden, soul-shattering blow like before, but a slow, creeping understanding. It didn't excuse Eleanor's actions, but it added a layer of tragic complexity to her monstrousness. The cycle of trauma, of familial expectation, of the relentless pursuit of status, was a powerful, insidious force. I had broken free, and in doing so, had begun to break the cycle for Serafina and Alaric. But the photograph, the robin, and the unsigned note were a stark reminder that the shadows of the past, however deeply buried, always lingered. The fight for truth, for genuine freedom, was never truly over. It was a continuous journey, a constant vigilance against the unseen hands that sought to manipulate, to control, to break souls for the sake of a legacy. And I, Ilara, was ready to continue that fight, armed with knowledge, resilience, and the enduring, if scarred, strength of my own spirit.